Informed Choice Radio, episode 510, Balancing Today and Tomorrow, with Lynn Beattie.
Live from Sundial House Studios, this is Informed Choice Radio. Want to make the most of your money and your life? You've come to the right place. Now, here's your host, Martin Bamford.
How do you strike the right balance between the competing financial needs of today and tomorrow? My guest on the podcast today is Lynn Beattie, also known as Mrs MummyPenny, author of The Money Guide to Transform Your Life. We get pretty personal in this conversation, chatting about Lynn's emotional spending and her spiral into debt after she started her business, as well as how to best approach weathering the coming economic storm. Lynn's new book gives you the tools you need to manage your money now, today, and also in the future, tomorrow. As a gifted mathematician, accountant, and personal finance expert, Lynn talks about some of the struggles that she has faced with money and the steps she took to overcome these struggles, transforming her life in the process. Here's my conversation with Lynn Beattie, Mrs MummyPenny, in episode 510 of Informed Choice Radio. So welcome back to Informed Choice Radio. I'm delighted to welcome Lynn Beattie. So Mrs MummyPenny, as you're better known, and it's been a while since we've chatted on Informed Choice Radio. I think 2.5 years, 3 years ago now.
It has been a while, but thank you ever so much for having me back. With a new name as well. I've gone back to Beattie. I used to be Lynn James.
Yes, yeah, but I think if we refer to you as Mrs MummyPenny, then obviously people know who you are and know what we're talking about. But we are here to talk about your wonderful new book, The Money Guide to Transform Your Life, and some fantastic nuggets and wisdom. So firstly, congratulations. It's not your first book though, is it? You've written a few.
It's actually my third official book, which let's just say the first two were practice books. They weren't really books that I wanted, it wasn't the sole purpose of my life to write either of those. I wrote a book about blogging, and I wrote a book about debt, actually, a whole book about debt, which I give away for free on my website. And it's like a diary of my debt story, which is one of the chapters in the new book, because I got into a lot of debt, paid it off over 2 years, a story that's been in the FT and every newspaper in the world. It got to a point where I've got so... Like you with your business, I've got so much content on my website that people would be asking me, where do we get a concise sort of view of all this guidance you're giving? And I was like, you're just going to have to read my website. So it was a natural step to create a book. So that's what I did. I created The Money Guide to Transform Your Life, and I started it in lockdown.
So yeah, a lockdown baby, as it were. And I saw stats in the press the other day that something like 600 or 700 books were published on the 6th of September, I think it was. So whether that's people writing lockdown books or just a whole backlog of books that didn't get published during the lockdown. So a lot going on in the book world at the moment.
Yeah, but it really felt, I started it in May, and it's a book that it's been on my mind for a couple of years. But writing a book, it's a really big deal. It's so much effort, it's so much work, and you can only do it when you're ready. When I got to the beginning of May, once we'd we didn't really know what on earth was going on in May, but I knew it was going to go on for a while. And I think just the fear of what would happen to the country financially started to sort of prey on my mind, because obviously I get a lot of messages from my followers and my readers about levels of debt and things that they're struggling with. So it was a real lightning bulb moment of, now is the time you have to write this book, and you have to get it out, by the time the kids might be going back to school in September, or by the time furlough is ending, all these kind of uncertainty things, because I think the future is, I can predict it. It's just my view and my view only, but I think we're in financial trouble as a country for at least another year to come. And once, I think we're going to see more companies start to make more people redundant. We're going to see more small businesses and big businesses going under. And it's just such an awful time that people need a really simple guide. And this is, you've got a copy, it's a very simple. I just wanted to make it easy for people to understand the basics of money saving on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis, but also the importance of preparing for a financial freedom.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's structured in it's structured in a very easy to pick up and put down way. So very succinct chapters. Part 1 is all about the now, bills, debt, creating an emergency fund, the things that you really should sort out now. And then part 2 is more about the future. So insurance protection, investment, pensions, and probably my favourite chapter in the book is do what you love.
We'll talk about that. And so, I share your view that I think things are going to get bad at a country level, probably for at least the next year. And we've not yet really seen the worst of it economically. No. When this furlough scheme ends at the end of October, I think that's going to be, when it gets very nasty out there for a lot of people in terms of job losses, companies folding, etc. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the narrative for individuals at an individual level. So there are steps we can take financially, with our own personal finances to insulate ourselves from the worst of the economic damage. Now, before we get in some of these topics in the book, I think it'd be useful to talk about your story, because it's very relevant, isn't it? And it's obviously it's in the book as well. But you mentioned a moment ago about getting into a lot of debt and then paying off over a couple of years. So potted history. What went on?
Yeah, potted history of Lynn Beattie / James. Mrs MummyPenny has been my 4th baby. Should we call it 4th or 5th? Because I have 3 children and I have a cat. Okay. So the business probably follows the children and the cat. Mrs MummyPenny was born in 2013. So I'm in my 8th year. It's a personal finance website that's been around for a long time. And I started it when I was on maternity leave. So my background is I'm a SEMA management accountant. So I've spent 16 years working for very big companies, HSBC, Tesco's, EE. I was a very corporate woman working in the city, working full-time 5 days a week, didn't really see my family, but earned a nice chunk of money. But I got to the point where I had these 3 young boys at home that I wasn't seeing. My childminder was seeing them more than me. So I had this side hustle, this little hobby going on, in the background. So I just had enough of the corporate world, and I didn't just quit. I got redundancy out of them. I made sure I did that, and that was like the nest egg I needed to. So that was back in 2015 to really focus on the business, but not having to worry too much about money, because I had that redundancy money there to pay the bills for, it should have been 18 months worth of money. I say should, because I didn't stop spending. I didn't adjust my lifestyle to this. I was earning nothing from my business for the first year of trading. Like literally, I turned over about $2,000 in the first, proper year of Mrs MummyPenny. I spent a lot of money on things I shouldn't have done: handbags, holidays, eating out, clothes. And the money started to run out by about 12 months in. Mrs MummyPenny wasn't earning enough money. So I had an immediate gap, and I ended up getting into debt. And it was quite a lot of debt. And I buried my head in the sand. I know I did it, as a lot of people do. I knew it was building up, but I just couldn't face adding it all up. By 2017, so my business has been going for 2 years. I had this crisis moment of, I think it was my 40th birthday, actually, was my crisis moment, where I added it all up after returning from a trip to Las Vegas that cost $5,000 that I couldn't afford. And I had 16 grand worth of debt, and I had no way of paying it back, because like Mrs MummyPenny was still in its infancy, like, as well as everybody listening to this. It takes a really long time to build a business for it to earn decent money to pay your bills. So I had this 16 grand worth of debt to pay back, minimum payments of like £200 a month. That would have taken 6 years to pay it back. So I seriously changed my life at that point. Like, properly budgeted, stripped everything right back. And this is all in the book. So there's a whole chapter dedicated to debt and describing the real sort of situation I was in and how bad it got. Because I think the beauty of my story, and you know this well, because we know each other from social media and talking on podcasts before. I say it as it is. I talk real life, and I relate it to things that have happened in my life. And there's been quite a lot of situations and scenarios I've been in that aren't great, but I've got out of them. So I really want people to see that, yeah, I've been in a load of debt, or I've gone through a divorce and I've survived it, and this is how I've done it, and this is how you can do it too. So each chapter, which is talking about, say, budgeting or debt or food, money saving, whatever it might be in the first part, I've related it all back to my real life experience. And I'm really not a millionaire with loads and loads of money. Like, I've had quite a few struggles, but I've got through them. So it's a really positive, inspirational story, which I hope people will enjoy, but the personal aspect as well.
But that inspiration is so important, because it makes people realise that no matter how difficult the situation they find themselves in right now is, there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are ways out. Thinking back, I mean, you're a trained accountant, you're an experienced accountant. Why do you think, with the benefit of hindsight now, why do you think you made those sort of spending decisions? Maybe they weren't conscious decisions, but you understood money in, money out. You saw there was no money coming in and there was lots going out. So what was it about your money personality, I guess, that allowed you to make those spending choices and to rack up that amount of debt in that time?
Yeah, I know exactly why I did it. So my parents died when I was a teenager. And I've got a bit of a mindset of life is for living.
Right.
So my parents died when they were fairly young. So my mum was 58, my dad was 63. So they hadn't got to experience their retirement or, spend any of the money that they'd spent their lives saving up. So that had a really big impact on me as a teenager. So I went off to university. I got the best degree I possibly could, went and got a maths degree because I knew I had to go and get a really good job, because I knew that I didn't inherit any money, by the way, because that's a whole complicated situation. It's all in the book. My dad left the money to somebody else. So I knew I had to get a really good job to fend for myself, because I still have nobody else to turn to for money. It's all on me. So when you've got that sort of fiercely independent mindset, and then you've got this, but my parents died young, so I've got to live life for now. I spent my 20s, going on amazing holidays. I got a crazy obsession with designer handbags, eating at ridiculously expensive restaurants, because I really wanted to experience the best of life. And when I was in my 20s, I thought that retirement or death was such a long way down the line that I just wanted to spend all the money. And I didn't even, and this is my biggest financial regret, I opted out of my Tesco pension, and I had a really good job at Tesco's. I was earning a good salary in my 20s, and I opted out. I don't even want to look at how much that could be worth, because it's money that's gone. But I took things a bit more seriously in my 30s, but that was when I had all my children. So I was either pregnant or bringing up a small child for most of my 30s. So my children are now 12, 10 and 7. So I did carry on a little bit with that living life for the moment. But then I started to move into, but no, you do need to be putting some money aside for the future. So I think for sort of my 30s and the beginning of my 40s, I've been conscious that, yes, I have to live life for the moment, but I also have to prepare for my financial future as well. But it's such a difficult balance, because I'm an emotional spender. I absolutely know I am. I reward myself, whether that be because I'm sad, happy, angry or whatever, with either spending or food actually is another thing I have used in the past. So it's only with sort of getting older, is realizing all these cruxes you have and coping mechanisms that aren't that healthy, because let's face it, emotional spending is not a healthy coping mechanism to stress. And sort of recognizing the triggers that go on. And I am getting in control of it. It's a process of life, right? I just feel like in my 20s and my 30s, I just didn't know any of this sort of stuff. And I hadn't done enough therapy, or the right kind of therapy, to get to the bottom of why I behave like I do. But I'm not. It's not a sob story of lots of bad things have happened to me, because obviously I've got this really successful business now, and I own this house that I'm sat in, and my business is doing well. But it's taken a lot of stuff to get there. And actually, I think my parents dying young was a gift in a way, because it made me this fiercely independent person who will make anything a success that I do.
So do you think that was it a gradual evolution of your mindset that sort of saw that those changes you've made in recent years, or was there a light bulb moment? Was there something in particular that triggered you to think, okay, that's enough, I'm going to deal with this debt now, I'm going to get this back on an even keel?
There's always been a light bulb moment, and it's normally a person who I really respect and trust, who almost, they're not physically shaking me, but they'll say something that will just be that aha. I remember when I was at university, so my dad died at the end of my first year of university, and then in the second year I completely lost the plot. Like, I was doing a maths degree, it was a very difficult degree at Brunel University, like one of the best in the country, and I lost the plot. And one of my friends, I remember saying to me, you need to get some help, because you're going to mess your entire life up if you don't get yourself sorted out now. So I went off to my personal tutor and arranged some counselling, and spent probably the next 3 years at university in counselling. But it's those sort of real honest friends, and I'm huge. Oh, my friends are just the most amazing people ever. But the person that helped me with the debt is another personal finance expert, actually. So it's Faith Archer, who's got a website Much More With Less. We've been great friends for years, and she's got a very different money philosophy to me. So, like, she doesn't have any debt. We've done a lot of spending diary comparisons, so we know each other's money mindsets and spending inside out. And I think she said to me one day, like, you just can't carry on with this level of debt. She's like, just let me help you, like, create a spreadsheet, let's go through it together. And I was a personal finance expert at the time, so it was a little bit like I was keeping it a secret, and I felt like a huge fraud having, all this debt, but yet still sort of talking about how I was saving money and stuff. So she sort of gave me that confidence to replan stuff and come up with a plan to get the debt paid off, which I did do in 2 years, which was pretty incredible. And I'm still debt free. And I came clean to my readers. I just wrote this blog post. I called it like Confessions of a Personal Finance Blogger. It was such a naff title, but it really hit a nerve with people, because I just came clean that I had all this debt. This is how it's made me feel, really, really bad, like mental health wise, and this is what I'm going to do to pay it off. And I then kept updating on my blog sort of every month or two how I was getting on with it, and it didn't go to plan. It went backwards sometimes, because in the summer holidays, like, I'm self-employed, so income goes down in summer and costs go up. I went on guilt holidays, felt bad that my children weren't having a holiday, so took them away. But I documented all that, and I almost like, that's almost like the reason why I think Mrs MummyPenny has been so successful, is I just laid it out on the table, and was very honest. And I actually did what I said I'd do. I paid off the debt, and lots of big newspapers and TV and radio have covered it as well, which all helps. But yeah, I think it's ironic, isn't it? Being 16 grand worth of debt is probably the thing that's made Mrs MummyPenny so successful.
And it's we were talking before we hit record about, I guess, authenticity, and it's odd. It's odd that you see so many people who on the surface level look successful. So they live in the right place, they drive the right car, they wear the right suit, etc., and they go on the right holidays, they send the kids to the right school. But actually, below the surface, for so many people, there's debt, there's issues with budgeting, there's conflict within the family, there's health problems, there's stuff we don't really see the picture. And I think social media has probably made that worse in recent years. We always talk about Instagram, etc., being the highlights reel of people's lives. They don't really share the real stuff. But by you sharing what's really going on, and as you say, a confession of a personal finance blogger, which I love that title, but I think that it's so important that there's more authenticity out there, there's more honesty out there about what people are really going through, because none of us know the challenges that other people face, really, unless they're close to us, unless they're friends. And I find it fascinating.
And every single person will have some kind of troubles in their life. And I just think, particularly when you think about sort of mental health issues, most people have had some kind of mental health issues, and there's still this huge taboo of talking about it. But if we could all just, I don't know, I know that me talking about grief, or me talking about debt or divorce or illness or any of these sort of taboo type subjects, if we could just have like one person listening and they just think, oh, that means that I'm not the only one who's going through a divorce, who's been in debt, then you're just doing such an amazing thing, aren't you? Being in the, media, influencer, public eye, whatever it is you want to call what I do.
Yeah, but very much so. Trying to make this as sort of practical as possible for people who probably are going to face quite challenging times over the coming months. And so clearly budgeting is something you touch on in the book and explain the importance of. What are some of the things people should be thinking about now ahead of what's probably going to be an uncertain number of months, even number of years?
It's really interesting at the moment. I really feel like you've got sort of two groups of people. So you've got the people who have still got their jobs and they've been working from home and they've probably got a little bit extra cash in their pocket. And then so let's maybe deal with them first. Then you've got the other people that are not in that position. So I think if you've got extra cash in your pocket, then you really need to be thinking about putting that money aside for the future. So the first core is the emergency fund. And that is something you have to have in place. You really need to have in place right now. And everybody's got different opinions as to how much that emergency fund could be. But I used to think 3 months of essential expenses was enough. But actually in January, complications around the divorce and tax bills, let's just say, I got hit with a massive tax bill in January and my 3 months emergency fund wasn't enough. And I was in the middle of a remortgage, so I couldn't borrow any money because that would affect my remortgage. So I had to borrow $5,000 from 2 mates. Now that was just the most awful decision I ever had because I didn't have enough money in my emergency fund. So now I'm of the view that I personally need to have 6 months worth of, and that means your essential expenses. So your mortgage, your gas, electricity, your food, your council tax. That's the first thing you need to have in place. And then once you've got that set aside, and that goes into an instant access cash account, I know it's going to earn you 1% interest, but it's there for emergencies. Yeah. And it's also there for things like real emergencies, like you need 4 new tyres on the car, or if you get made redundant. And then you've got that security of, it's all right, I've got 6 months worth of money just sat there with the sole purpose of paying my bills for the next 6 months while I'm looking for that next job. But if you've got money in excess of that, then, I suppose the world's your oyster, isn't it? I wouldn't recommend blowing it all on a holiday, which I know a lot of people have done. Think about putting it into a simple investing fund or into your pension.
And I share the same opinion that I think in the past, this conventional wisdom of a 3-month emergency fund, essential expenditure for 3 months, isn't for most people enough. And particularly as you get older and potentially into retirement when your earning capacity reduces, to replenish your emergency fund becomes more of a challenge. So starting with a bigger number, a bigger pot size, gives you much more flexibility. And particularly during a recession, we're seeing stories now about the lack of availability of mortgages, for example, particularly for first-time buyers, people with small deposits. Banks will pull down the shutters effectively when things get tough economically because they're worried about people's ability to make repayments. They're worried about people getting into arrears. So having that cash gives you so many more options and so much more security and peace of mind. I think what's really about.
It's painful, isn't it? I do feel pains that I've got about 10 grand sat there in my emergency fund, and it's horrible that it only earns a teeny bit of interest when I could stick it into my stocks and shares ISA and hopefully earn a bit more. I mean, who knows? Because obviously stocks and shares ISAs go up and down with value.
They do.
Yeah, it's just, I think there's more of the mental health benefits with your emergency fund, that you just got it sat there. But that's obviously the people that have got a bit of spare money. But then you've got this whole portion of people, millions, who maybe they only had 80% of their income rather than 100 because their employer wouldn't top it up. They've had to go into work, their hours have been reduced, they've been put on part-time, or they've completely lost their jobs. And for those people, it's a huge rationalisation of your monthly expenditure has to happen very quickly. And it's going back to the basics of personal finance. It's making sure you've got the best deal for your energy and your mobile phone. It's making sure you don't have loads of, like Sky TV can easily cost people 90 quid a month. Do you really need Sky TV if your income has drastically gone down? Probably not. It's going through the list of direct debits that hit your bank account and going through that list every sort of 3 months just to check that everything is exactly what you need, because these direct debits sort of sneak in.
Yes.
Like, do you really need Amazon Prime and Netflix and Disney Plus?
Oh, you're shaming me now.
Yeah, I have to admit, I've got Amazon Prime and I've got Netflix, but I don't have Sky TV.
No, and you're right about what you're saying is, how quickly Sky TV can become, 50, 60, 70, 90 quid a month, whatever. What I found fascinating, this goes back, I guess, to a conversation we had around emotional spending, is how difficult it is to make those cuts to our expenditure, even though we know times are tough. And the number of people I've seen who this summer have jetted off to Spain or Turkey or Greece or somewhere and almost seen it as a right to have that foreign summer holiday, despite everything that's going on in the world in terms of the pandemic and the risk of the virus and the economic issues that they're probably going to face over the coming months. And these are people who have been on furlough, seen their wages cut to 80%, who have quite unstable job security. But something in them, something in their psyche is saying, I have to have the foreign holiday. I have to treat the kids and the family to this holiday, despite probably rationally knowing what's coming up next.
It's a really interesting thing, because I've been through this mental torture when I've been in debt. So there was the summer of like 2016. I just couldn't handle the fact that all my children's friends were going on a foreign holiday and I couldn't afford to take them. So I just decided to spend something like £3,000 for a week in Centre Parcs in France. I was thinking going to France, it would be cheaper for Centre Parcs. It was cheaper, but then we went and spent another £1,000 over it, feeding them and paying for all the activities. I just couldn't get my head around I don't want my children to not miss out on but it was more about me. It's more about your mindset, because the kids at the end of the day, they don't really, my children, they don't really care if they're on a beach in Norfolk or if they're on a beach in Spain. They just want to be on a beach. Or if you can't afford it, it's just getting your head around this thing of, I had, at that point, I think I had like 8 grand's worth of debt left, and going on holiday took me back to 11 grand's worth of debt. So is it really worth that much? And sort of I think a lot of people at the moment are thinking about the now, and you just need to propel yourself forward a little bit to maybe like 3 months, 6 months down the line. Like, how much of a risk is it that you're going to lose your job? Unfortunately, I don't think anybody really knows if your job is secure anymore. Even if you I've worked for like Tesco's, EE and HSBC, even those 3 big names, they will be making people redundant. And they're 3 of the most secure blue chip companies. So a job a job that used to be for life is absolutely not for life anymore.
And it's not just this pandemic-driven recession that's going to cause this. When we're seeing this sort of acceleration of technology, AI replacing jobs and things. So if people can sort of get, as you say, get out of the now, thinking about what's happening today, and start thinking about what's going to happen in 6 months' time, 6 years' time, 12 years' time. Because the world is changing. It's changing so quickly, and we're not very well equipped, I think, as humans to deal with that speed of change.
So we're talking like at the sort of beginning-ish of September. So there was a press story that came out yesterday with robots talking to people in old people's homes.
Didn't see it, but I want to. I'm going to go and check that out.
It was on the 10 o'clock news last night. And these AI robots were actually having emotional conversations with old folk in old people's respite elderly homes. And they were having a real genuine conversation. They were talking to the old people afterwards, and they were like, was that a meaningful conversation to you? And they were like, yes, it was, because they actually listened to me, and I was able to talk about stories from my past, and we had time together. And that was a bit of a realization of, wow, you think how many people are in that sort of caring role who are rushed off their feet, I know, and particularly at the moment, it's just one of the most challenging jobs out there with COVID. And yeah, I think it is difficult to take your head out of the now and move into the future. But I'm really, one of the things I'm extremely passionate about is finance for women, because I think women, a lot of the time, they often deal with the day-to-day finances, but they often leave the future sort of planning of finances to their male partner. Let's be I'm being generalistic about this. I know it's not the same in every household, but it often is. And what tends to happen is that women take the maternity leaves and do a lion's share of the caring, and that impacts on their earnings and their pension contributions. So they start earning less money, they start putting less into their pensions. And then, sorry to say this, but 42% of marriages end in divorce. And suddenly you're in this situation, and that's nearly half of marriages, right, end up in divorce. You end up in this situation where you maybe gave up your job, or you only do 2-3 days a week. You have to look after these children half the time, or 5 days of the week, or whatever you end up. And your husband's got this massive pension pot, and then you're in this like financial situation of how you sort out the divorce. But if, as a woman, I'd give this advice to women in their 20s and 30s, is make sure it's really balanced between the partners. And like husbands can transfer money into their wives' pensions to make sure that it's more fairly split, and just just don't rely on another person down the line, because anything could happen to that person. And I'm not just talking about divorce, like they could get ill, or they could lose a job and not find another job, or just there's so many uncertainty things that could happen. And we all know with life, like difficult things do happen. People do get ill, people do die, people do get divorced. So I think it's just don't live in this world that everything will be all right and everything's a fairy tale. I sound very cynical there, don't I?
No. It's not cynical. It's really realistic. I think that's a fantastic tip as well, which is to make sure in couples you balance the now and the future, almost as equally as possible between both couples. Because as you say, otherwise, and it does tend to happen a lot, the female partner is dealing with the day-to-day budgeting, is dealing with the childcare on a daily basis, and then the male partner is the one that's putting the money into the pension and thinking about the future. So balance that from outset, and you resolve a lot of problems that might appear there later down the track.
Yeah, totally. I just don't want women to be, I want them to take an interest in finance and to realize that it's really not scary. It's actually, personal finance is so simple. It's just like, try to save as much as you can on a sort of monthly basis so you can have some nice treats, but also have an eye on the future and be putting money into your pension, particularly if you're employed, but even more important when you're self-employed, because you've got to do it yourself. And just have an eye on that future, because we don't want to be working forever unless you do what you love, which I do, you do.
That's the real secret, isn't it?
Yeah.
Doing it, yeah. Lynn, this has been one of those conversations where I've not used any of the questions I prepared and sent over to you. And I think those are the best conversations sometimes. So I've genuinely enjoyed having this chat with you this morning. I hope our listeners will enjoy it too. Before we wrap things up, just to ask you, how can we get hold of a copy of the book? How do we find the website and find you on social media and things? So what are the links we should be looking out for?
Thank you. So yes, the book can be bought on my website, which is mrsmummypenny.co.uk. There's a bit at the top that says book. Click on that. I would rather you buy it from me because let's say Amazon take a massive cut.
And plus, you get an autographed copy if you buy it from you, which is...
You get an autographed copy, like as you have done.
Yes.
So it's available on Amazon as well. And hopefully it will soon be in bookshops, but that's all being negotiated as we speak. Mrs MummyPenny UK on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram is where you get the real honest me. So that's probably the best place to go follow me. It's really not a curated Instagram feed. It's just real life. And
we get to see you standing in front of giant billboards of yourself as well, which is always fun.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah, congratulations. That was wonderful.
So I'm a billboard model for Pension Bee, just to describe to the listeners. I'm one of their customers and they chose me for their campaign. So there's billboards all over the country. It's crazy.
Crazy in a good way. Lynn, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
A big thank you to Lynn for joining us for this episode of the podcast. I really enjoyed that conversation. Personally, I think some of my favourite podcast conversations on Informed Choice Radio have been more or less unscripted. So we always prepare questions for our guests, which we share with them in advance of the conversation. But when I'm able to just chat to them and ask questions about them and their life and their views, for me, that always comes across the best. And it's the ones I really value, those conversations. So a big thank you to Lynn for joining us and for having that very deep and personal conversation. I hope there were lots of nuggets in there that you found useful, particularly as we move ahead into what could be quite difficult times economically, financially for the country. Do check out Lynn's new book. It's called The Money Guide to Transform Your Life. I'll put links in the show notes to her website, which is also where you can buy the book. You can get it from Amazon too, but it's always better for independent authors like Lynn to buy the books directly from them. It obviously takes a middleman out of the equation and puts more money in the pocket of the author, which is a good thing given what's going on right now. So do check out the show notes at icradio.co.uk. Check out Lynn's book and give her a follow on social media too. That's always a really big help. And let Lynn know where you heard her. Tell her you came from Informed Choice Radio. That helps us out too. Thank you for listening. I'm Martin Bamford. This is Informed Choice Radio. And until next time, when it comes to your money, the more you know, the faster it can grow.